Welcome to the deep dive. So our mission here is pretty straightforward. You bring us the articles, the research, maybe your own notes, and, well, we dive in.
Yeah, we try to pull out the really important stuff, the key takeaways, give you that shortcut to understanding what's going on.
Exactly. Maybe find a few surprising things along the way. And today, we're diving into China,
Yeah.
specifically the post-COVID landscape.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is looking at how the pandemic wasn't just a temporary thing, but how it really sped up and kind of locked in some major trends. Tech, consumer behavior, that sort of thing.
And the source we're looking at suggests China might be a bit of a test case, almost. Since they moved through that initial phase faster, maybe we can see hints of what a more resilient future looks like elsewhere.
Right. Our source is an article from an IT journalist looking back over the past year or so in China, spotting these specific changes that seem to have stuck.
And the picture they paint is, about a year after that really strict Wuhan lockdown, things had settled into a new rhythm.
Life changed, yeah. Some memories fading. But, interestingly, things like masks on public transport, in busy places, still there.
But here's the really fascinating bit the source points out. That big push towards non-contact life. Online groceries, remote work.
Stuff we all experienced.
Totally. But it didn't just disappear when the immediate danger passed. It stuck. Because people found other reasons to keep doing it.
Right, like convenience maybe, or efficiency. It wasn't just about avoiding germs anymore.
Exactly. So it's less about returning to normal and more like building a new normal.
One that's maybe inherently better prepared for future outbreaks, more resilient.
And China's experience is interesting because they did this adaptation, this integration of new tech and habits on such a massive scale, and arguably faster than many other places.
Okay, so the source digs into 5 specific, maybe smaller scale trends that really settled in after COVID. Concrete examples of this new normal taking shape. Let's unpack those.
Yeah, and what's insightful is that the source notes many weren't brand new ideas. They were already bubbling under the surface. The pandemic just gave them a huge, maybe irreversible push.
Okay, first one. This was huge everywhere during lockdowns, it seems, but really cemented itself in China. Live commerce.
Ah, yes. The source basically calls this the single biggest change accelerated by the pandemic. It was growing before, sure, but it became totally embedded. Think major platforms like Taobao Live, but also the short video giants, Douyin.
TikTok's counterpart in China.
Right. And Kuaishou. Those became huge players.
The numbers the source quotes are kind of mind-blowing. Douyin's gross merchandise value, the total value of stuff sold, hit over 500 billion yuan in 2020. That's like, what, 70 billion US dollars?
Roughly, yeah. And Kuaishou, over 380 billion yuan. The source points out this is like 3 or 4 times Amazon Japan's GMV. These short video apps basically rocketed into the top tier of Chinese e-commerce in just a couple of years. And the source talks about the different styles, too. Like, Taobao Live started more with Taobao experts. Hosts who really knew their products, maybe came from sales, like that famous guy Li Jiaqi, started selling L'Oreal at a counter.
Ah, so like a knowledgeable salesperson, but live, online, answering your questions?
Pretty much closer to traditional affiliate sales. But on Douyin and Kuaishou, the source says the big sellers are often these Wanghong influencers.
Okay.
They weren't necessarily pros at sales first. They built huge followings with entertaining content. Maybe they knew tons about telling good liquor or were amazing at makeup tutorials. Then they started selling stuff they actually liked and used.
Ah, so it's more about that connection, the trust with the audience, selling through the content, not just listing products.
Exactly. And the source makes a really interesting point about why this might not just pop up the same way everywhere else, like the US or Japan.
Cultural differences.
Yeah, that's what they suggest. That live commerce in China kind of mirrors the traditional way people shop there. Lots of interaction, maybe some bargaining, that back and forth with the seller. It feels familiar, just online.
Like the digital version of chatting with the shopkeeper, haggling a bit.
Precisely. Whereas the source notes, in places like Japan or the West, shoppers often prefer to browse on their own, right? Ask for help only when needed. That high-energy, really interactive live commerce style might feel a bit intense or pushy.
Yeah, I can see that. The source mentioned some attempts like Walmart trying things with TikTok in the US didn't exactly explode, and challenges in the UK with rules. But interestingly, they think markets like Indonesia, Southeast Asia might be more up into it.
Cultural similarities, perhaps?
So the takeaway is the tech is global, but success really hinges on fitting with how people already behave, the cultural norms. Live commerce won't look the same everywhere, but this super interactive content-first selling, It's a major lasting shift in China.
Shows how commerce itself is adapting.
Okay, trend number 2 the source gets into. Something called community group buying, or shektuanggu. This one, the source notes, is a really big deal in China, but maybe less likely to be directly copied elsewhere, which is interesting in itself.
Yeah, this makes you think about what's universal versus what's very local, right? So, shektuanggu, as the source describes it, is basically using platform tech and logistics for those neighborhood corner stores, especially the ones selling fresh food, daily stuff in residential areas.
So linking up all those little local shops under a big tech company.
Kinda, yeah. The source explains these small, traditional shops often relied on personal relationships, their own unique suppliers. But they struggle to compete on price with the big online players.
Naturally.
But their value is as real community hubs. They know their customers, maybe they drop things off for older folks, they can find specific things people want.
That personal connection algorithms can't really do.
Exactly. So this group buying model uses that. A big platform handles the buying in bulk, the logistics, getting those small sharps better prices. Then the shop owner manages the last mile, getting the big order, sorting it, people picking it up, maybe even delivering locally. They keep that vital customer relationship.
Ah, okay. And that's why the big tech names, Alibaba, Tencent, Meituan, are pouring money into this.
The source reckons so, because even if each shop is small, you chain together thousands, tens of thousands. That's huge business overall. Plus, using the local shop owner for flexible delivery appeals to busy younger people too, not just older generations. And the crucial bit is potential. Because they're community hubs, maybe down the line they become points for other services, laundry drop-off, checking in on seniors, package collection points.
So they could become these multi-purpose community centers powered by tech.
That's the idea, the potential. Now, the source is a bit skeptical this exact model works in, say, Japan, because they already have that super dense network of efficient convenience stores.
Right, the convenience.
But the idea behind it, using existing local spots, adding tech efficiency, making them convenient pickup delivery points, that's relevant anywhere people are thinking about adapting to more spread out non-contact shopping, finding new value in what's already there.
Makes sense. Okay, third trend, remote work and remote education. We all lived through this, but the source has some really telling numbers from China after the peak crisis.
Yeah, this section really hits that building a new normal theme hard. Obviously, remote work tools exploded during the lockdowns early 2020. But check this. The source has 147 million users in June 2020. That's when lockdowns were easing.
Okay.
By December 2020, 6 months later, 346 million users.
Wait, hold on. More people using remote work tools after they could theoretically go back to the office. That feels backwards.
And that's the core insight. It wasn't just an emergency fix. A lot of people, a lot of companies clearly adopted or ramped up remote work in the second half of 2020, even when offices were open again.
Why, though?
The source suggests it's because for many, especially in tech or bigger firms, and for employees, remote work actually showed real benefits beyond just safety.
Like maybe better productivity in some roles? Or more flexibility? Better work-life balance for people?
That's what the source hints at. Especially where you have clear ways to measure output, remote work could actually boost productivity and keep employees happier.
Okay, so remote work stuck partly because it just worked better for a chunk of the workforce, not just because they had to. What about remote education then? Did that stick the same way?
See, that's a different story. And just as revealing, China actually had a pretty big online education scene before COVID, like 230 million users back in June 2019.
Okay.
Predictably, it shot up to 420 million in March 2020 when schools were closed nationwide.
Makes total sense.
But then, by December 2020, it dropped back down to 340 million. Still way higher than pre-COVID, definitely. But it didn't stay at that peak like the remote work tools did.
So why did remote work have more staying power than remote school K-12 anyway?
The source puts it down to primary and secondary schools, mostly going back to face-to-face teaching once they could. The feeling seemed to be, especially for younger kids, that being in the classroom was just more effective overall.
No.
But, and this is key, the online systems, the ability to do online learning, that didn't vanish.
They kept the infrastructure, the option.
Exactly. The source really emphasizes that the online education mechanism is still there and much stronger. So the system's way better prepared if another emergency forces schools online again. And interestingly, the private online education sector, tutoring, test prep, adult learning that absolutely boomed, Registered companies went from like 150,000 to a massive 700,000.
Wow. Huge jump in the private side. So the takeaway here is kind of a paradox, isn't it? Work shifts more permanently remote or hybrid because the benefits became clear. K-12 school mostly goes back in person, but keeps and improves its online backup plan.
It really shows a society learning on the fly, adapting, keeping changes that added value, going back where face-to-face seemed better, but building resilience across the board.
A clear case of learning from crisis. Okay, let's switch gears a bit for the fourth trend. Something lighter, but also tells us a lot about consumer shifts. The blind box boom. Source says this was already a thing, but COVID really poured fuel on it.
Ha, the manke, or blind boxes. Yeah, fascinating because it's purely leisure entertainment. The source describes them as these little collectible figures, usually in a series, sold in sealed boxes so you don't know which one you're getting.
Like those Japanese gacha capsule toys, right?
Yeah.
The source mentions those were an inspiration.
Totally. But the twist, the source says, is adding rare secret figures into the mix, which, heavily encourages buying more and more to complete the set or find that rare one. And they aren't super cheap, like 30 to 60 yuan a box, maybe 5 to 10 US dollars, and collectors buy dozens.
Definitely adds up fast. Who's buying these mainly?
Source points to young women, especially late 20s, making up something like 70% of the buyers. They collect them, display them, kind of like how people elsewhere collect Funko Pops or designer toys.
Okay, so a strong hobby, specific demographic. But the source makes this really interesting cultural comparison that caught my eye.
This is where it gets really interesting culturally. The source contrasts how this kind of hobby is viewed in China versus, say, Japan. In Japan, even though the otaku market is huge, intense collecting hobbies can sometimes still be seen as a bit niche, a subculture. People might not broadcast their interest widely.
Kind of like a badge of being slightly outside the mainstream.
Maybe, in some ways. But in China, the source argues ACG culture, anime, comics, games, which includes figures, has become super mainstream among younger people. It's seen as a totally normal, socially okay hobby now.
Ah, so that wider social acceptance probably helps the market grow faster.
Precisely. The source even mentions this term 8 pit girls, young women into like 8 specific hobby areas. Figures, cosplay, traditional Chinese clothes elements, stuff like that. And the pandemic. It pushed this further because with travel, restaurants, other outside fun cut back, people had more spare cash and time for indoor hobbies like collecting.
Right, the money and time had to go somewhere. The source also mentioned the quality of Chinese-made ACG stuff is improving, potential for export, especially maybe Southeast Asia.
Yeah. So the insight here isn't directly about, health resilience, but it's a big part of how society adapted, how people found new ways to have fun, spend their leisure money when they were home more. Adaptation isn't just practical stuff, it's finding joy, too.
Find new ways to express yourself in changed times. Okay, finally, fifth trend. This one the source calls the women over 30 boom. Seems less like a specific product, more a cultural shift, a demographic power shift.
Yeah, the source points to how incredibly popular media focused on women in their 30s became, like that audition show, Sisters Who Make Waves.
Right, with contestants over 30 acting like pop idols.
Exactly. And that hugely popular TV drama, Nothing But 30.
Nothing but 30. That title rings a bell like it's playing on a famous quote.
It is, yeah. From Confucius. At 30, I stood firm. The source says the show hit such a nerve because it showed women dealing with life, work, relationships, identity, specifically in their 30s, which is often a really pivotal time.
And why did this resonate so strongly right now with this generation?
Well, the source talks about the unique path for many women currently in their 30s in China. They grew up during that crazy economic boom, intense school pressure, focused hard on careers, then maybe marriage, kids, family, often just relentless pressure for 3 decades. Hitting 30 becomes this big moment to pause, rethink things.
Yeah, the source had this really affecting line about watching those over 30 sisters on the Idol show, trying so hard to perform, finding it both kind of funny but also deeply relatable, seeing people who'd lived life at full speed looking for something different.
And this cultural moment ties straight into consumer trends, the source highlights. Women in their 30s are super active online shoppers. They spend a lot on cosmetics, clothes, both high-end and affordable, and many are really into managing their finances.
So they have significant spending power, and they're comfortable online.
Exactly. And because they're often juggling careers and family, the source notes they really value convenience, smart, time-saving services, but they can also be quite impulsive buyers when something clicks emotionally. That mix makes them a huge target for marketers who are getting much more specific in how they reach them.
This trend really shows how these post-pandemic shifts aren't just about logistics or remote tools. It's also about how powerful groups are choosing to spend their time, money, and focus in a changed world. Another side of adaptation, finding new ways to feel fulfilled, express yourself, and consume.
Yeah, it underlines that the new normal is shaped just as much by economics and deep cultural currents as by practical changes.
Okay, so let's try and pull these threads together. We've seen how China's pandemic experience wasn't just a blip. It really pushed forward trends that were already there, locked in new habits. A big societal shift away from only face-to-face stuff in shopping and work.
And crucially, as the source emphasizes, a lot of it stuck because people found new benefits during that emergency time, convenience, efficiency, maybe just new ways to enjoy things through non-contact methods.
Right. And the source's main argument is really important. China didn't just snap back to how things were. They seem to be actively building a new normal, one that's just fundamentally more resilient to future pandemics.
It was like this giant society-wide experiment under pressure. They kept remote work where it made sense, keeping the online learning systems ready. They went back where things didn't work as well, like K-12 schools mostly returning to in-person. But the result is a society that's just better prepared.
And we shouldn't forget those interesting entertainment trends. The blind boxes, remote dining experiments, home fitness, parent-child games the source mentioned. It wasn't just practical adaptation. People were finding new ways to have fun, enjoy life, while staying safer or being home more.
Yeah, the source really pushes the idea that we should be looking closely at China's experience right now. It gives us real clues about what a pandemic-resilient society might look like, and it forces you to think about how businesses, how society elsewhere might need to fundamentally adapt.
It definitely gives you a lot to chew on. If the goal isn't just getting back to the old normal, now the immediate crisis feels past, well, what parts of your own life, your community, your work, could you maybe intentionally adapt now? Could they be more resilient, more convenient, maybe just better? Drawing inspiration from some of these big changes we've talked about.